Hi everyone, welcome back. In the previous parts, we looked at how to organize notebooks and how to manage multiple Google accounts inside NotebookLM Tools. But once your notebooks start growing, the next challenge isn't just finding the right notebook anymore, it's managing all the sources inside. Because at the end of the day, NotebookLM is really built around sources, articles, PDFs, YouTube videos, research notes, websites, everything starts there. So in this part, we're going to look at source management, one of the biggest sections of this update. I'll show you how to add sources in different ways, organize them into folders, move them around, rename and manage them, check freshness, and clean up duplicates. So first, let's talk about adding sources. Right now, I'm going to open this notebook called YouTube AI Video Ideas. And once I'm inside, I can just click on Add Sources. And one thing I really like here is that I'm not limited to just one import method. Depending on the type of content I'm working with, there are multiple ways I can bring sources into NotebookLM. So first, we have the text method. This is useful when I just want to quickly save ideas, notes, drafts, or any text-based research directly into the notebook. So, for example, I can quickly paste a few AI video ideas like this and add them straight into NotebookLM. Right now, you won't see the new source appear on the list immediately because the source list hasn't refreshed yet. So this refresh button here lets me sync the latest sources from NotebookLM. And once I refresh the notebook, the new source shows up right away. Now that's the text method. Let's go back to Add Sources and take a look at the next import option. Next, we have the links method. I won't spend too much time demoing this one because it's pretty straightforward. Basically, if I already have web pages, articles, or online resources, I can paste one link or multiple links in bulk, one per line. Here you can see I've pasted a few example links, and the extension detects them as links ready to import. I can also use include or exclude filters if I only want certain links, or if I want to remove links that match a specific pattern. And down here, there are options like hash, params, and clean which help control how the URLs are handled before importing. For example, I can keep or remove tracking parameters, clean up messy URLs, or decide how URL fragments should be treated. There's also an option to extract links from a sitemap, which helps when I want to collect pages from the same website faster. So this is great for quickly bringing web research into the notebook. Now let's move to something more useful for video research YouTube playlists. For this one, I can paste a YouTube playlist link here. And what's nice is that the extension automatically detects the playlist. So instead of manually copying each video one by one, it pulls the videos from the playlist and shows them here. I can then choose which videos I want to import, instead of adding the entire playlist blindly. I won't import them right now since I just wanted to show how the detection works. So that's the YouTube playlist method. Paste a playlist, detect the videos, and choose what to import. Now let's move to RSS feeds. If you're not familiar with RSS, it's basically a feed that websites use to publish their latest articles automatically. When you open an RSS link directly in the browser, it may look like this, just a raw XML page. It doesn't look very readable here, but this feed actually contains the latest articles from the website. For example, I'll use an AI-related RSS feed from The Verge. So I'll copy this RSS feed URL, paste it into the RSS method here, and then click Parse Feed. Now the extension reads the feed and turns it into a clean list of articles. From here, I can quickly review the articles, select the ones I want, and add them to this notebook. After I click Add, the articles are added to the notebook, but they may not appear in the source list immediately. So I'll click Refresh here to sync the latest sources from NotebookLM. And now you can see the articles from the RSS feed showing up here as sources. So instead of manually opening and copying each article link, the extension pulls them from the feed and adds them into the notebook for me. Now let's open Add Sources again and look at another fast way to import content: browser tabs. This one is useful when I'm already researching across multiple tabs and want to bring them into the notebook quickly. As you can see, the extension detects the tabs I currently have open in this browser window. It also shows which ones are valid and which ones can't be imported. For example, some extension pages or internal browser pages may be marked as invalid. The valid tabs are selected automatically, but I can still choose which pages I actually want to add. Since this is just a quick walkthrough, I'll leave these as they are for now. Now let's move to the last method here, zip files. This is useful when I already have multiple files prepared, for example, markdown notes or research materials. Instead of importing each file one by one, I can upload a zip file here, and the extension will extract the files as sources. I'll just go over this one quickly, but that's the basic idea. So those are the main ways to add sources from inside the notebook: text, links, playlists, RSS feeds, browser tabs, and zip files. But I don't always need to start from the notebook page. Sometimes I'm already browsing something useful, and I just want to send it to NotebookLM quickly. So now let me show you another way to add sources directly from the extension Popup. Here, I'm already on a YouTube playlist page. Instead of going back to the notebook dashboard first, I can just open the NotebookLM Tools pop-up from here. And because this is a YouTube playlist, the extension recognizes it right away and gives me the playlist import option directly inside the pop-up. From here, I can choose which videos I want to import. For example, I'll unselect this first short, because I only want to add the videos that are more relevant to this notebook. Then, instead of creating a new notebook, I'll add this to an existing one. So I'll click Add to Existing Notebook, choose my YouTube AI Video Ideas notebook, and add the selected videos as sources. And that's it. The playlist videos are now added without me having to go back to the dashboard first. So the pop-up is really useful when I'm already browsing and want to capture something quickly. And there's also one more fast way to do this, using the right-click context menu. For example, let's say I'm reading an article and I only want to save one specific part of it, not the entire page. I can highlight the section I care about. Right-click. Open the NotebookLM option from the menu, and choose Add Selection to Notebook. Before adding it, the extension gives me a preview. I can see the original page URL, the selected text, and the content that's about to be added. So I can quickly check everything before sending it into a notebook. From here, I can either create a new notebook or add it to an existing one. In this case, I'll add it to my existing YouTube AI Video Ideas notebook. And once it's added, it shows up as a new source inside the notebook. I can also open the preview here and confirm that the selected text was saved correctly. This is really useful when I don't need the whole article. I only want to capture one specific section while I'm reading. So with the context menu, I can save content without breaking my browsing flow. So now we've covered different ways to add sources. From inside the notebook, from the pop-up, and even directly from the right-click menu. So now that I've added different types of sources into this notebook, the next step is keeping everything organized. Because once the source list starts growing, it can get messy pretty quickly. That's where source folders come in. I can create folders to group related sources together. For example, I'll create a folder called YouTube References for the videos I imported earlier. Now that the folder is created, I can start moving related sources into it. I'll start by moving one source into the folder first. And now this video is grouped under YouTube References. But once there are more sources, doing this one by one isn't really ideal. So I can select multiple sources, click Move to Folder, choose the folder I just created, and move everything together. This is much faster when I'm organizing multiple sources from the same topic, like the YouTube videos I imported earlier. Now for the article sources, I'll use a slightly faster workflow. Instead of selecting sources from the full list, I can use the source type filters first to narrow things down. First, I'll create another folder called AI Articles, so I can keep all of my article-based sources in one place. The extension automatically detects the type of each source, so I can quickly filter by things like text, web, or YouTube. Since I only want to organize article sources right now, I'll click the web filter. Now I'm only looking at web sources, instead of mixing them with videos or text notes. From here, I can select all of these web sources at once. Click Move to Folder, choose the folder I just created, and move everything together. So this is more precise than selecting from the full source list, especially when the notebook has different types of content mixed together. And there are still a couple of text sources that don't belong to any folder yet. You can see they're still under Ungrouped, which basically means they haven't been organized into a folder. So I'll select these remaining text sources, click Move to Folder, and instead of choosing an existing folder, I can create a new folder right from here. I'll choose Create and Move to New Folder, and name it Research Notes. Now these text sources are moved into a brand new folder automatically. And even after sources are already organized into folders, I can still move them around really easily. For example, if I realize this source actually belongs in AI articles, I can just drag it from one folder and drop it into another. And now it's moved into the new folder. But if I change my mind, I can drag it back just as easily. So the folder structure stays flexible. I can keep adjusting it as my notebook evolves. Beyond moving sources around, the folders themselves are easy to manage too. For example, if this folder name is a bit too general, I can open the folder menu here, choose Edit, and rename it to something more specific, like YouTube AI References. This makes the structure clearer, especially when I have multiple folders for different types of research. From the same menu, I also have the option to delete the folder. The extension asks for confirmation first, and it also tells me that deleting the folder won't delete the sources. The sources will just become ungrouped again. I'll cancel this for now because I still want to keep this folder organized. Finally, if I don't need to see all the sources inside a folder, I can simply collapse it. Now the list looks much cleaner, and I can focus on the sections I'm actually working on. Then, whenever I need those sources again, I can expand the folder back. So folders make the source list much easier to work with. I can group sources by topic, move them around, rename folders, delete folders when needed, and collapse sections to keep the notebook clean. Once a notebook starts growing, this makes a huge difference. But once the folders are in place, there's still another layer to clean up. The notebook is organized now, but the individual sources still need attention. Some names are too long, some references are related and should probably be merged, and some sources may need to be copied, moved, or deleted later. So next, let's look at source operations. Basically the tools that help keep the sources themselves clean and usable. Before editing anything, I usually like to quickly preview the source first. That way I can confirm what the source actually contains before renaming, merging, moving, or deleting it. I can quickly preview a source anytime by clicking this eye icon, which becomes especially helpful once the notebook starts getting larger and I need a faster way to confirm what each source actually contains. Let's start with a simple rename. Right now, this source is called The Mirage of the Artificial Companion. The original title is fine, but for research workflows, I usually prefer naming sources based on their purpose, instead of keeping every imported title exactly as is. So I'll click the little pen icon here, rename it to something clearer like AI Companion Research Notes, and save the change. That way, when I scan the notebook later, I immediately understand what this source is actually for. Small cleanup like this makes a huge difference once a notebook starts getting crowded. Renaming one source is useful for small edits, but when multiple sources come from the same playlist, website, or RSS feed, editing them one by one would get tedious really fast. That's where bulk rename becomes much more useful. Here I've got several YouTube sources imported from the same playlist. And since they all start with NotebookLM Tools, the titles are consistent, but they're also a bit long. So instead of editing every title manually, I can select multiple sources, open bulk rename, and use replace text. I'll replace NotebookLM Tools with a shorter version like NLM Tools. Before applying it, I can preview all the changes first. That preview is important because bulk actions affect multiple sources at once, so I want to make sure everything still looks clean and readable before confirming. And once I apply it, the source list instantly becomes easier to scan. Another useful option is add text, which can work either as a prefix or as text added after the source name. For example, I can add a prefix like YT to these sources. So even if the notebook gets larger later, I can still immediately recognize which sources came from YouTube. You could also use labels like research, article, reference, or project-specific prefixes depending on your workflow. Just like the previous rename method, I can also preview the result first to see how the updated names would look before applying the change. In this case, I'm just using the preview as a quick example before moving on to the next rename method. And if I want a completely cleaner naming structure, I can use the custom rename method. For example, instead of keeping longer imported titles, I can turn these into a cleaner sequence like Tutorial Clip 01, Tutorial Clip 02, and so on. I probably wouldn't do this for every notebook because sometimes the original titles are still useful. But for curated projects, structured workflows, or grouped reference collections, this can make the notebook feel much cleaner and more organized. So the general idea is single rename for small edits, replace text for repeated cleanup, add text for labels, and custom rename for fully restructuring source names. After cleaning up the names, searching becomes a lot more useful too. For example, if I search for audio, the list instantly narrows down to the source that matches that title. So this is not a feature I need to over-demo, but it's useful when the notebook has dozens of sources, and I just need to find one specific item quickly. Now I'll clear the search, because for the next operation I want to work with my research notes folder. Here I have two text sources, one called AI Companion Research Notes, and another called Blueprint for AI Video Production. Instead of keeping these as two separate notes, I can select both of them and merge them into one source. So I'll select the two sources, click Merge, And now the extension opens a merge workflow. On the first step, I can name the merged source. I'll call it Combined AI Research Notes. There's also an option to delete the original sources after merging. For this example, I'll keep that selected, because I want to turn these two notes into one cleaner source instead of keeping duplicates. After that, I'll fetch the content. Then in the preview step, the extension shows what's going to happen. Two sources will become one merged source. The total content size is shown, and the original sources will be deleted. I can also preview the combined content before confirming. Once everything looks correct, I'll click Merge Sources. And now I have one merged source called Combined AI Research Notes. This is helpful when smaller notes are related to the same topic, and I want NotebookLM to work with them as one consolidated reference instead of scattered pieces. Another really useful workflow is reusing sources across different notebooks. For example, these two YouTube references are useful here, but I may also want them inside a completely separate notebook for another research topic or project. So instead of importing the same sources again manually, I can just select them and click Copy to. Once the copy window opens, I can search for another notebook directly from here. For this example, I'll copy these sources into this notebook called Social Security Disability Insurance at a Crossroads. And before confirming, the extension shows a compatibility preview. In this case, both YouTube sources can simply be re-added as original links inside the target notebook. There's also an option to delete the originals after copying, which basically turns this into a move operation instead. But here I'll keep the original sources and just copy them over. Once I confirm, the sources are added into the other notebook immediately. And if I open that notebook, I can now see those same YouTube references available there too. This becomes really useful when one source is relevant across multiple projects, because instead of re-importing everything manually, I can reuse existing sources in just a few clicks. And once the sources are copied over, the next thing I usually check is whether anything in the original notebook still needs to stay here. Because after copying, merging, or reorganizing sources, there are often a few references that I no longer need. For individual cleanup, I can simply use the trash icon on the right side of a source. Clicking it opens a confirmation modal first, so I can double-check before removing anything. And for larger cleanups, I can also select multiple sources at once and use the Delete button from the top toolbar. So instead of deleting sources one by one, I can review everything together in a single confirmation step. I'm not actually going to remove these here, but this is basically the workflow I'd use for clearing out outdated references, temporary imports, or leftover test sources after reorganizing the notebook. So at this point, the notebook is already much cleaner. The folders are organized, the source names are easier to scan, and unnecessary references can be cleaned up pretty quickly. But once notebooks start growing over time, there's another issue that usually starts showing up: duplicate sources. And honestly, duplicates happen more easily than you'd expect. Sometimes I import a YouTube playlist first, then later manually add one of those same videos again without realizing it. Or maybe I imported the same article from browser tabs, RSS feeds, or links at completely different times. So before showing the duplicate scanner itself, let me quickly create a realistic duplicate example. Here's a YouTube playlist link that I've already imported into this notebook before. But now I'm going to import the same playlist again, just to simulate what can happen when I accidentally add the same source twice. Once the playlist is detected, I'll add the videos again and refresh the source list. And now the notebook has duplicate YouTube sources, which is exactly the kind of situation the duplicate scanner is designed to catch. So instead of manually checking every source myself, I can let the extension scan the notebook for repeated references. To do that, I'll click the Scan Duplicates button here, and the first thing that opens is the Scan Mode Selection modal. By default, Fast Scan is selected. This mode checks for duplicates using matching titles and URLs, so it's much faster and works really well for obvious duplicates like repeated YouTube playlist imports or identical links. So I'll start with Fast Scan first. After the scan finishes, the extension groups the duplicate sources together automatically. At the top, I can immediately see how many duplicate groups were found and how many duplicate sources can be cleaned up. Under that, I can also choose the default keep preference. For example, I can keep the oldest imported version, or instead keep the newest version if I want the fresher source to stay. And below that, I can review every duplicate group individually. Each group shows the similarity percentage, how many matching sources were found, and which version is currently selected to keep. There are also a few cleanup options here depending on how much control I want. If I click Skip, the extension ignores just that duplicate group. Skip All ignores every detected duplicate entirely. Cleanup Selected only removes the duplicate sources I manually reviewed and selected myself. And Cleanup Duplicates applies the cleanup automatically based on the current keep preference. So the workflow can be either fully automatic or much more manual and controlled depending on what I need. If I want a more advanced scan, I can also click Scan again and switch the notebook over to Deep Scan instead. Unlike Fast Scan, Deep Scan also compares the actual source content, not just titles and URLs. So even if two sources have slightly different names, the extension can still detect that the content itself is nearly identical. This is especially useful for copied notes, edited articles, or imported sources that came from different links, but still contain basically the same information. After the deep scan finishes, I can review the duplicate groups the same way as before, but now the matches are based on actual content similarity too. For this example, I'll manually choose which versions I want to remove. And since these duplicate videos came from the newer playlist import, I'll keep the newest versions and remove the older duplicates instead. Once I'm done reviewing the duplicate groups, I can clean them up using Cleanup Selected. Before anything gets deleted, the extension opens one final confirmation modal, and here, I can clearly see how many duplicate sources are about to be removed. I also get a list of the source names that will stay in the notebook after the cleanup finishes. There's even a small reminder recommending a backup first if I'm unsure, which is a nice safety check before bulk cleanup actions. So once everything looks correct, I can confirm the cleanup here. The duplicate sources are removed, and the notebook goes back to a much cleaner state again. And honestly, this becomes really useful once sources start coming from playlists, browser tabs, RSS feeds, copied references, and repeated imports over time. Because instead of manually hunting duplicates down myself, I can scan the notebook, review the results, and clean everything up in a much more controlled way. And that also wraps up the source management section. We started with adding sources in different ways, then organizing them into folders, then managing the sources themselves with rename, merge, copy, move, delete, and duplicate cleanup. So the big idea is, NotebookLM Tools doesn't just help me add more sources. It helps me keep the whole notebook usable as it grows. And once the sources are clean and organized, the next step is working with what NotebookLM creates from them, the studio items. So in the next part, we'll look at quizzes, flashcards, mind maps, slides, audio overviews, and more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.